So you gotta remember, after the complete disaster in the Teutoburg Forest, where Rome lost 3 entire legions, they were absolutely reeling. Their pride was shattered. For years, the Rhine was a frontier of fear. But all of that was about to change because of one man, Germanicus. All right, let's dive into the story of Rome's bloody 3-year quest for revenge deep in the dark forests of Germania.
And make no mistake, this was not just a military campaign. It was an act of total, brutal vengeance. This quote from the historian Tacitus about the massacre of the Marsi tribe, yeah, that tells you everything you need to know about the Roman mindset here. They weren't there to talk, they were there to punish.
So how did this all kick off? Well, picture this. It's the year 14 CE. The great Emperor Augustus is dead, and the legions on the Rhine are in open mutiny. They're furious about their pay, their service conditions, the whole shebang. Their commander, Germanicus, has a huge problem. Does he let that rage turn back towards Rome, or does he point it somewhere else? He chose the latter and aimed all of that fury like a weapon straight at Germania.
And what makes this whole conflict so fascinating is the incredible clash between the two men in charge. On one side, you've got Germanicus, a Roman princeps, basically royalty. He wants a big, decisive, open battle to prove Rome is still the best. And on the other side, Arminius, the man who won at Teutoburg. He's a master of the ambush, of guerrilla warfare, and his whole goal is to just bleed the legions dry. These two completely different styles are going to define the entire war.
Now you've got to understand, these first raids, they weren't about grabbing land. This was pure psychological warfare. When Germanicus burned entire settlements to the ground, like the Chatti capital of Latium, he was sending a chilling message to every single Germanic tribe: Rome is back, and there is absolutely nowhere you can hide.
All right, so that brings us to the year 15 CE, and this is where things just explode. All that cautious poking at the frontier, that's over. Germanicus is now launching a massive, multi-pronged invasion. The goal? To shatter the Germanic coalition once and for all.
And man, what a year it was. Just look at this timeline. It's a total whirlwind. It kicks off in the spring with a huge invasion. By May, they've captured Arminius' own pregnant wife. In the summer, they launch this giant naval force. And then they make this incredibly emotional trip to the site of the Teutoburg disaster. But, as we're about to see, the year ends in a near-total catastrophe, proving just how deadly Germania still was.
But in the midst of all that fighting, the Romans scored a huge symbolic victory. They got back the eagle standard of the 19th Legion. Now, for a Roman soldier, this standard, the aquila, it wasn't just a metal bird on a stick. It was the sacred soul of their legion. To get one back was this incredible shot in the arm for morale. It felt like they were finally restoring their honor.
But the campaign also had this incredibly somber, powerful moment. Germanicus actually led his army to the site of the Teutoburg disaster, and there they found them, the whitened bones of 3 entire legions, just lying there, unburied for 6 long years. Tacitus says Germanicus himself laid the first clump of earth for a burial mound. Can you just imagine the mix of grief and pure rage that must have filled those soldiers as they buried their brothers?
And they were going to need every ounce of that rage, because for all their success, the Romans were constantly fighting for their lives. The campaign of 15 CE would end with 2 separate Roman armies on the very brink of being completely wiped out, proving that Arminius was every bit as dangerous as he was 6 years earlier.
And here's how Arminius almost did it again. He lures this big Roman force, under a general named Caecina, onto these narrow wooden roads built over a marsh, the Pontus Longi. Then he floods the area, turning the whole place into a muddy trap. The baggage train gets stuck, and that's when he attacks from all sides. It was basically Teutoburg 2.0, a perfect trap that almost annihilated 4 legions.
And it wasn't just Caecina's army. Oh no. At the exact same time, Germanicus' own force, which was retreating by sea, gets hammered by a massive North Sea storm. Men, horses, supplies, all just swept away by the tide. So yeah, the Romans had won some victories, but the cost was absolutely immense. They barely limped back to the Rhine after suffering devastating losses.
But Germanicus was not about to quit. For the next campaign, in 16 CE, he decided to go all in. He put together this massive fleet, over 1,000 ships, to just bypass the dangerous forests and swamps. His goal was simple: find Arminius, force him to fight on open ground, and end this war for good.
And you know what? He got his wish. At the Battle of Estavaso, he finally gets Arminius out on an open plain and just crushes his army with a classic, perfectly executed cavalry flank. Later, when the Germans regrouped behind a big defensive wall, Germanicus used artillery and a three-pronged attack to shatter them all over again. In a straight-up fight, Roman discipline and tactics were just unbeatable.
But here's the incredibly frustrating part for the Romans. Germanicus wins the battles, but he can't get the man. At Idista Viso, Arminius literally smears his face with blood to disguise himself and slips right through the Roman lines. At the Angravarian Wall, he escapes again. For all of Rome's victories, the one guy they wanted most was still out there. Still, the year ended with another massive symbolic win. During a final raid, Germanicus's men found and recovered a second of Varus's lost eagles. 2 out of 3 were now back in Roman hands. From a military standpoint, from a symbolic standpoint, the war was won. Period.
So, Germanicus had beaten the Germanic tribes in battle. He'd recovered the symbols of Roman honor, and he'd pushed all the way to the Elbe River. He had won. But this is where the story takes a sharp, brutal, unexpected turn. Because as it turns out, winning on the battlefield doesn't always mean you've won the war.
Let's be really clear about what he'd accomplished. By the end of his final campaign, Germanicus made a formal declaration. Germanicus is pacified. For all intents and purposes, the land between the Rhine and the Elbe was Roman again. All he said he needed was one more year, just one, to lock it all down. And then, right at the absolute peak of his success, a message arrives from Rome. It's from the Emperor Tiberius. The order? Stop. Come home. Now. Now, Tiberius offered Germanicus a triumph, which is the highest military honor you could get in Rome. But it was also a brilliant political move. See, Tiberius was this older, kind of gloomy emperor, and his adopted son Germanicus, he was a rock star, wildly popular with the people, adored by the army. He was popular, maybe too popular. When Germanicus asked for just one more year to finish the job, Tiberius said no, and with that, he ended the reconquest of Germania. And this is the final bitter irony of the whole story. After 3 years of unbelievably brutal fighting, staggering losses, and incredible victories, Germania wasn't lost on the battlefield. It was abandoned. Abandoned because of a political decision made in Rome, fueled by the insane cost of the war and an emperor's paranoia about his own successful, charismatic heir.
Which leaves us with this final thought. Germanicus fought a brilliant, brutal war against a truly formidable enemy in Arminius. But in the end, was the chieftain in the dark forests of Germania his true opponent? Or was it his own uncle, the emperor, sitting on the throne back in Rome? It's a question that would not only define the Roman Empire, but would literally shape the map of Europe for centuries to come.